Welcome back, guys. In today's episode, I'm sharing 10 true disturbing stories about being home alone in Kentucky. These stories will make you think twice before ever spending a night alone out there. But before we begin, please consider subscribing, and don't forget to like and share it with your friends. Let me know where you're watching from. Thank you all. Now let's start. The house technically came as a gift. My parents had retired to Arizona the year before, surprise move, no warning. Instead of putting the old place on the market, they handed me a dusty box of keys and said something like, "See if you can make use of it." Real casual, like they were offering leftovers. It was the kind of house that nobody quite knew what to do with anymore. It sat just outside a small town called Ellenshore, about 20 minutes from anything you could reasonably call civilization. A gravel road got you there, winding past soybean fields, then dipping through a patch of woods that always felt a little too dense for its size. You didn't accidentally find this house. It was tucked away like it had been hiding on purpose. We'd used it as a summer place when I was a kid, weekends here and there, mostly. I remembered fireflies, mildew, and the sound of raccoons clattering around in the attic. It was charming in that very specific way childhood memories are, even if the place itself had always been a little rough around the edges. I moved in thinking it would be temporary, fix it up, maybe rent it out. Worst case, I'd just flip it. But the longer I stayed, the more it started to feel, still, like it had been waiting for something to happen, and I'd interrupted it. It was a 2-story farmhouse with wide plank floors, high ceilings, and huge windows that let the woods peer in a little too easily. The air inside always smelled like old wood and dryer sheets. Even though the dryer was long dead, the walls were thick. You couldn't hear much from room to room. That kind of silence either calms you down or sets your teeth on edge. At first, it calmed me. 3 weeks in, that's when things started. It was a Thursday night. I'd spent most of the afternoon painting the back guest room, a color that had looked soft and minty in the store but turned out straight up hospital green. I was wrecked. Paint on my leggings, streaks in my hair, that weird ache in your neck from bending too long in the same direction. I curled up on the couch, half glass of wine in one hand, watching a documentary about shipwrecks. That's when my phone buzzed. A baby monitor alert. Now let me be clear. I don't have a baby. Not even a plant I trust myself to keep alive. But the app was still on my phone from last year when I helped my sister with her newborn. I'd used the monitor while babysitting and just never deleted it afterward. The camera had been packed up and shoved in a closet months ago, long forgotten. So why was it showing movement? At first, I thought it was just a leftover notification. Sometimes apps glitch. I opened it. The screen was black. I was about to close it when I heard something. A voice. Crisp and close, like someone speaking into a mic 2 inches from their mouth. Just a second. I'll be right there. It wasn't the TV. I had paused the documentary. There was no sound in the room except what came from my phone. I just sat there for a second. My wine glass tilted in my hand. Then came another line. Hang on, same voice, same weird closeness, like it was speaking from inside the room but filtered through something small. I closed the app immediately. My heart was beating harder than it had any right to. I set the phone down like it might bite me and walked down the hallway toward the guest room. The paint still smelled sharp. The door was cracked open just like I'd left it. I pushed it wider and stepped in. Nothing looked touched. I walked over to the closet. Closed. I was positive I'd shut it after storing the box in there, but it felt heavier now. Like the air on that side of the room had thickened. I opened it. The cardboard box sat exactly where I remembered, top shelf, under an old fleece throw. I pulled it down, sat on the edge of the bed, and peeled the tape off with shaking fingers. Inside was the camera. Cracked, dusty, still wrapped in bubble wrap. No lights, no battery. Definitely not plugged in. And yet the app was still open on my phone, still playing that audio like it had more to say. I deleted it on the spot, uninstalled the whole thing. Then I just sat there for a while, holding the empty box in my lap. I didn't sleep that night. Nothing happened for a few days after that. I kept telling myself it was a tech glitch, some weird leftover pairing, a server hiccup, maybe even someone else's monitor bleeding into my feed. That's a thing, right? I Googled it but found nothing useful. Then Monday night hit. I was still in project mode, trying to keep busy, and figured I'd tackle the front hallway. Narrow space, but the paint had peeled like crazy over the years. I was crouched low, edging the baseboards, when I started to hear a faint humming. At first I thought it was coming from outside, but it wasn't birds or wind. It was a person, a child maybe, humming a tune that was just slightly off-key. The rhythm was broken. The notes didn't land where they should have. It didn't make sense. I stood up, holding the roller like I might use it as a weapon, and listened. It was coming from the guest room. Same room. Of course it was. I walked down the hallway slowly, trying not to breathe too loudly. Something in my brain had switched into survival mode, like I needed to tiptoe through my own house. I reached for the door. The humming stopped. Not faded, just snapped off like someone had hit pause. I opened the door. The room was empty, paint half dried, the drop cloth still wrinkled across the floor. I looked at the closet. It was open. Just an inch, maybe less, but it had been shut. I hadn't touched it since that night with the monitor. I stepped forward and nudged it open. The bulb inside was glowing. I stood there for a good 10 seconds, just staring. It was a pull string, no wall switch. No way it could have turned on by itself unless someone had physically pulled the cord. I finally reached up, yanked the string, and shut the door. Then I locked it from the hallway and slept on the couch again, with every hallway light on and a kitchen knife under the cushion. After that, nothing happened for a while. 3 days, quiet. No noises, no alerts, no voices. I almost let myself believe it was over. I almost let myself go back to normal. Then I remembered the sconces. I'd packed a pair of vintage brass sconces to use in the hallway. Beautiful things, warm finish, little details like leaves and vines curled around the arms. I remembered labeling the box, fragile, lighting, but I couldn't find it, not in the basement, not in the garage, not in any of the closets I'd already opened a dozen times, which left the attic. I hadn't touched it since moving in. The access panel was in the laundry room ceiling, just a plywood square with one of those rattling, unreliable ladders bolted to it. I'd avoided it for good reason. It looked like the sort of thing that would collapse if you breathed on it too hard. But I needed those sconces. I climbed up slowly, flashlight in hand. The air hit me like a wall, hot, dry, and thick with that musty insulation smell that coats your throat. The attic was a mess. Boxes stacked at weird angles, furniture draped in sheets, random bins with labels I didn't recognize, some written in handwriting that definitely wasn't mine. I moved through slowly, brushing insulation from my arms, aiming the flashlight at each corner like I expected something to flinch. I found the box wedged behind an old coat rack. Same label. I smiled, proud of myself for remembering. I opened it. There they were, perfect condition. I reached in and heard wind chimes, not distant, not outside, right behind me. Soft and tinkling, like a breeze had swept through a porch that didn't exist. I froze. I don't own wind chimes, not in the attic, not anywhere on the property. The flashlight wobbled in my hand. I turned around slowly. Nothing had moved. No drafts, no open windows. The air felt dead. Then came the crash. Something heavy and metallic slammed down across the attic. Not right beside me, but close enough that I nearly dropped the box. I spun around with the flashlight, light shaking across every box, every blanket, every dusty shape in that place. Nothing. Everything exactly where it had been. No fallen chair. No tipped shelf. I didn't close the box. Didn't put anything back. I backed toward the hatch, climbed down the ladder 2 steps at a time, and dropped onto the laundry room floor without looking back. Then I walked out the front door and sat on the porch until the sky turned gray. My parents had taken off for a weekend trip, a bed and breakfast near the lakes for their anniversary, and left me in charge of the house. It wasn't a big deal. I'd been left alone plenty of times before. They trusted me, and honestly, I liked having the place to myself. It gave me room to breathe. No one asking what I was doing or why I was eating cereal for dinner. The house sat out in rural Kentucky, way back from the road down a long gravel driveway. The gravel always crunched like it was announcing your arrival. It was surrounded by open fields on 3 sides. Behind it, a thick stretch of woods that had always felt ancient to me, even as a kid. The nearest neighbor, the Myers, lived about half a mile down the road. That's not an exaggeration. It really was that kind of isolation. No sidewalks, no street lights, just land, trees, and the occasional far-off bark of a dog. Growing up out there, I got used to the quiet, the kind of silence that has layers. During the day, it wasn't so bad. The wind rustling through the cornfields, cicadas buzzing, maybe a tractor humming in the distance. But at night, that silence felt like something else entirely. Like the whole world took a breath and just held it. Still, that night, I was enjoying it. After they left, I went through the usual routine, locked the doors, turned off the lights downstairs except for the living room, settled in. I made a snack, turned on the TV, and planted myself on the couch. I wasn't even watching anything in particular, just flipping through channels, half watching reruns, half scrolling on my phone. I kicked my feet up and let myself go limp. It felt good. Somewhere around midnight, I got up to grab another snack, some crackers, maybe leftover wings from the fridge. On the way back, something caught my eye. The front door. The bolt was unlocked. I stopped mid-step, snack still in hand. That didn't make sense. I was sure, absolutely sure, I had locked it earlier. I even remembered the exact sound it made when I slid the bolt across. That stiff, dragging scrape that always made it feel like it needed oil. I could see myself doing it right after my parents' car pulled out of the driveway. But here it was, unlocked. I stood there for a second, just staring. It's strange how something so small can feel so wrong. The door wasn't wide open, it was shut. But the bolt, that tiny piece of metal, was doing nothing. I walked over slowly, snacks forgotten, and slid it back into place. Double-checked it. Pulled on the handle just to make sure. It was locked now. That was good. I told myself I must have thought I'd locked it, but didn't. Maybe I got distracted. It happens, right? Still, something about it nagged at me. I went back to the couch, turned the TV on again, and tried to forget about it. But the show, some crime drama I didn't even like, just became background noise. I kept glancing at the door, like it might do something on its own. It didn't. Nothing did. About an hour later, I got up again, this time just for water. The kitchen's at the back of the house, and to get there, you pass the back door. It has one of those old-fashioned latches. No bolt, just a hook you loop through an eye. Not exactly Fort Knox, but out there good enough. Or at least it should have been. The latch was undone. The door was pulled just slightly ajar. Not open, not swinging, but resting against the frame, like someone had closed it gently without locking it. That door doesn't stay shut on its own. The wood swells in the humidity, and you've got to lean into it to get it closed right. Earlier that night, I slammed it shut. I remembered the sound. I remembered the vibration through the floorboards, but now it was just open. This time I didn't shrug it off. I stood there for a full minute, holding the glass of water, heart pounding. Every part of me tried to come up with a reasonable explanation. Wind? No, the trees weren't even moving. Maybe I hadn't latched it, but I always latch it. I'm the paranoid one in the family when it comes to that stuff. I stepped forward, closed the door again, leaned into it until I heard the thud, then slid the hook into place. I jiggled it, held it. It stayed. Good. Then I walked back through the hallway. That's when I saw the mirror. It's a narrow little thing, more decorative than useful. I'd passed it 1,000 times. Usually I just caught a glimpse of myself and kept walking, but this time I stopped. I'd raised my arm to fix my hoodie, nothing dramatic. Just tugging the sleeve back from my wrist. But in the mirror, there was a delay. A fraction of a second, but it was there. I moved again, slower this time, and watched. Same thing. The reflection followed, but just a hair behind. I leaned in, blinked, waved my hand. There it was again, a lag, like watching a live stream with bad connection. My heart tapped faster. I told myself it had to be my eyes. I'd been staring at the TV too long. Maybe it was some optical trick. The hallway light above me flickered sometimes. Maybe it was that. I turned the light on fully. No flicker. Then I walked away from the mirror. But I left the light on behind me. Didn't say why. I just didn't want the hallway dark. The house was still. Too still. No voices, no creaking floors, no clatter of dishes. Just the low hum of the fridge and the tick of the old wall clock above the stairs. It felt like the house was holding its breath again. Then, just as I lowered myself onto the couch, I heard it. One loud creak from the stairs, right in the middle. That one step that always groaned the worst, the one you couldn't sneak past. It wasn't the house settling. I know that sound. This was deliberate. A single, heavy press. Then silence. I didn't move at first. Just sat there, stiff as a board. My ears strained so hard I swear I could hear my own blood. I scanned the room for anything I could use. My eyes landed on the fireplace poker. Not ideal, but better than nothing. I picked it up, and my fingers wrapped so tight around the handle they started to hurt. The stairs stood ahead of me, barely visible from where I sat. Every step creaked if you looked at it too hard, and right then, they might as well have been a cliff's edge. But I moved. Step by step, I climbed. Each board groaned under me like it was announcing me. I kept the poker out in front like I thought someone might jump. But no one did. The hallway upstairs was dark. I flicked the light on. All the doors were open. My bedroom, my parents' room, the bathroom, each one empty. I checked them all, even under the beds like I was 12 again. Nothing. No strange smells, no open windows, no sign of anyone. Still, I didn't feel right. I came back downstairs and didn't bother with the TV this time. I just sat there, gripping the poker, listening. And then I saw it. The mirror. I wasn't moving. I know I wasn't. I was sitting still, staring down the hallway. But in the mirror, my reflection moved. Just a little. It tilted its head to one side. Not a big tilt, just a curious, slow shift, like it was watching me. I didn't tilt my head. I froze. Completely still, eyes locked on the glass. My throat dry, my palms slick. I don't even remember deciding to drop the poker, but suddenly it clattered on the floor. A loud, echoing clang. I ran, didn't think. Didn't grab my phone, didn't lock the door. I just yanked it open and sprinted barefoot down the driveway, gravel digging into my feet the whole way. I didn't stop when I hit the road. I was house-sitting for my Aunt Lydia, way out in the countryside, about 20, maybe 25 minutes outside of a small town called Latham in western North Carolina. It's the kind of place where GPS starts glitching before you even hit her street. You turn off the main road onto a narrow, two-lane strip of cracked pavement that looks like it's been forgotten since the 80s. If another car comes, one of you has to dip into the overgrown shoulder and hope your tires don't sink. Cell signal is spotty at best. At night, it feels like the world just cuts off. Her house sits way back from that road. You can't see it from your car unless you know where to look. Trees on all sides, not neat park trees, but thick, old-growth forest that crowds right up against the property line. After dark, it's like standing at the edge of a black ocean. You can't see anything past the porch light. There's one neighbor on the next ridge, about 3/4 of a mile away, but you'd never know unless you hiked for it. She asked me to stay there for the week while she visited her sister in Birmingham. I'd done it once before, in the summer. It was peaceful then, bugs chirping, breezy evenings, lazy mornings drinking coffee on the porch swing. This time was different. It was early February. Cold, quiet, and far too dark. My only job was to feed Scout her ancient mutt and make sure the place stayed locked up. She said he'd be good company. And he was, at first. The first night was fine. I got there late afternoon, dropped my bag in the guest room, fed Scout, made some spaghetti, then flipped through channels until I passed out on the couch. The heat worked. The fridge was stocked. The dog snored like a lawnmower. Nothing to complain about. Second night, more of the same. Walked Scout around the edge of the property with a flashlight. Cooked some box mac and cheese. Watched old reruns until I drifted off. I don't even remember falling asleep. By the third night, though, I started noticing strange things. Nothing dramatic, just little details. I went to lock the front door before bed and found the deadbolt already turned. That caught me off guard. I always leave it unbolted after taking Scout out, because I hate fumbling with keys in the dark. I was sure I had left it undone, but there it was, locked. I stood there with my hand still on the knob, trying to reason it out. Maybe I did it without thinking. Maybe I went back and locked it and forgot. I've done dumber things. So, fine, I brushed it off. The next night, I made a point. After Scout's walk, I very deliberately left the bolt undone. I even said it out loud, leaving this unlocked, just to make sure I'd remember. An hour later, I went to check. It was locked again. No sound, no footsteps, no creaks or clicks. Just a locked door where I knew I hadn't touched the bolt. Scout sat beside me, head tilted, ears twitching, staring straight at the door like he was listening for something. I felt that strange sensation, like being watched. Not from outside, but from inside, like something was already in the house watching us. I backed away and tried to make a joke, something dumb like, "Guess we've got helpful ghosts," but it didn't feel funny. On the 5th night, I decided to test it. I brought a dining room chair into the living room and set it facing the front door. Sat down with the blanket. Scout curled up next to me, both of us quiet. The bolt was definitely unlocked. I checked it twice. Half an hour went by. Nothing, just the buzz of the fridge cycling and the occasional creak of the house settling. Then, without warning, the bolt turned. Click. It wasn't fast. It slid into place, slow and careful, like someone had twisted it from the inside. I stared, frozen. I'd seen it. I saw it happen. Scout jumped up, nails scraping the floor. He growled, a low, serious sound I'd never heard from him before. His whole body stiff, head low, eyes locked on the door. I didn't move. I don't think I even blinked. I just sat there until the sky started to lighten, and Scout finally laid back down, still watching that door. The next day, I searched the house. Every closet, every cabinet, the crawl space under the back deck, even the garage. Nothing. No signs of forced entry. No broken windows. Nothing missing. I even checked the attic, just dusty boxes of Christmas decorations and a few mouse traps. Still, when night came, that pressure returned, like something was waiting. I was standing at the sink doing dishes when I heard it. Footsteps. Clear, heavy, steady, above me. Except, there's no upstairs. The house is one level. Always has been. I turned off the faucet. Didn't dry my hands. Just stood there dripping, listening. The steps were slow, not pacing. Wandering, measured. Not an animal. Just footstep after footstep after footstep. Scout backed into the far corner of the kitchen, teeth bared, growling. His eyes tracked something I couldn't see. The steps faded. Later that night, I took laundry down to the basement. The staircase was narrow and steep, like walking into a cave. I was halfway down when I saw it. The pull chain on the ceiling light was swaying, not wildly, just moving like it had been flicked. That bulb doesn't move unless something touches it. The air was still, and the chain just swung. Smooth arcs, creaking. I turned and ran up the stairs, shut the door. Locked it, didn't finish the laundry. By the 6th night, I was barely sleeping. Scout stayed in my room, restless, ears twitching at every sound. Around midnight, he started whining at the door, pawing at it, tail down. I stepped into the hallway, heard a faint sound from the kitchen, metal on metal. The silverware drawer was open. Every fork, knife, and spoon had been taken out and lined across the counter. Parallel, perfect spacing. I hadn't touched that drawer all day. I didn't clean it up. I turned off the kitchen light and went back to bed. Scout followed, glancing back like he expected something to follow. Then came the last night. I woke to barking. Not alert barking. Scout was losing it. Snarling, lunging at the back door like he wanted to break through it. On the porch, there were footprints. Bare, human, wet footprints, leading from the grass, up the steps, across the boards. They stopped at the door, but they didn't lead away. No return prints, no drips, no splashes. They just ended. I opened the door without thinking. Nothing. The porch was empty. Trees still. Trees still. Grass unmoving, but the prints soaked into the wood, fresh as if someone had just been there. I slammed the door and threw the bolt. Before I could breathe, I heard movement. Behind me. Footsteps. Inside the hallway, slower than mine. Heavy, dragging with each step, like someone walking on a numb leg. I couldn't turn around. My body locked. Adrenaline screaming. Then I moved. Grabbed my keys. Scooped Scout into my arms. Bolted through the front door without even closing it. I didn't stop driving until I was back in my apartment. Locked the door. Pulled the blinds. Scout pressed against me like he thought the floor might open. In the morning, I called Aunt Lydia, told her everything. Didn't leave a detail out. She didn't sound surprised. Just quiet. Then she said, calm as anything, don't worry too much. That house has always been strange. When I asked what she meant, her voice went cold. Told me to let it go. Said she didn't want to talk about it. I was 19 when it happened. My parents had gone out of town for the weekend, just a short trip to visit some family in Georgia. Nothing unusual. They did it every now and then, usually just for a couple of days to catch up with relatives and recharge. This time felt different though, mostly because it was the first time they were leaving me completely alone in the house since we'd moved to Ashfield, a quiet little town tucked deep into the hills of Kentucky. I remember feeling kind of excited about it, not in a wild throw-a-party kind of way. More like I finally had the whole place to myself, no curfews, no small talk over dinner, no background noise from the TV my dad always left on too loud. Just quiet, just space. I thought it would be nice, peaceful. The house sat way off a country road, buried in a patchwork of trees and rolling hills. You couldn't see the neighbors from our porch. And once you turned off the main road, there weren't sidewalks or streetlights anymore. At night, it got dark, really dark, and quiet in a way that felt heavier than I expected. That first night went by without a hitch. I got home from work around 6, dropped my bag by the stairs, and ordered pizza from Danny's, the only place in town that delivered that far out. I kicked off my shoes, stretched out on the couch, and let a marathon of old thrillers play while I stuffed my face with greasy slices and drank too much soda. Around midnight, I made one last loop through the house to double-check everything. Locked all the doors, clicked off the porch light, turned on the hallway lamp upstairs so I wouldn't have to walk into darkness if I got up in the night. Dad had drilled all that into me after we moved. Always lock up. Always be aware of your exits. Keep a light on. Basic stuff, but it stuck. I slept like a rock that night. The next morning, I came downstairs still groggy, rubbing sleep out of my eyes, and something caught my attention right away. The back door. The handle was locked. But the deadbolt, the one I specifically remember sliding into place before bed, was undone. Just sitting there, like it had never been touched. At first, I just stared at it, waiting for my brain to catch up. I was sure I'd locked it. Positive. I could picture the way I turned it, even the little click it made when it slid into place. Still, I started doubting myself. Maybe I only thought I did it. Maybe I got distracted. It had been late. I'd been tired. It was possible I missed it. Not likely, but possible. I stood there for a while, then finally just shook it off. Made myself a mug of coffee and tried to move on with my day. Nothing else weird happened that morning, so by lunch, I'd mostly forgotten about it. Later that afternoon, I was upstairs folding laundry, headphones in, music low, when I heard this faint hissing sound, just barely loud enough to cut through the music. I paused the song, thinking maybe it was the pipes or the AC kicking on, but the sound kept going, like static. I followed it downstairs, annoyed more than anything, and when I got to the living room, the TV was on. Snow, full-blown glowing white static. I hadn't touched the remote. It was still sitting on the coffee table right where I left it the night before. I hadn't even used the TV that day. I clicked it off and stood there for a second, watching my reflection fade from the screen. Trying to think it through. Maybe a signal glitch. Maybe a power flicker. Technology does weird stuff sometimes. Still, it left a pit in my stomach that wouldn't go away. That night, I didn't even pretend to be relaxed. I turned on every light I could without blowing a fuse. Left the TV off completely. Made a frozen dinner I barely touched. And paced around the house more than once, checking locks and looking out windows like I was expecting something. Nothing happened, but the silence from the night before felt different now. Not peaceful, just still. Too still. Too still. I went to bed around 11, lamp on, phone clutched in my hand. I scrolled through social media just to distract myself. Around 1 in the morning, I must have dozed off. Then something woke me up. It wasn't loud, but it was unmistakable. A slow, dragging sound like heavy wood scraping across tile. Not fast, not frantic. Just steady. Drawn out. I didn't move at first. I just lay there, heart thudding in my chest like I'd sprinted up a flight of stairs. My mouth was dry. I swallowed and listened, trying to convince myself it was the fridge or maybe something fell, but it wasn't. I grabbed the aluminum bat I kept next to the bed. My dad insisted on that and crept out into the hallway. Every floorboard felt like it screamed under my feet. I eased down the stairs one at a time, holding my breath. The kitchen was dark, but I saw it right away. One of the chairs at the kitchen table had been pulled out. Not all the way, just a few inches. But it was angled weirdly, not like someone had just used it. It was turned slightly toward the back door. I stood there staring at it, frozen, my brain catching up to what my eyes already knew. I hadn't moved that chair. I hadn't touched it all day. And even if I had, I never left chairs like that, angled, pulled out, like someone had just been sitting there. My hands shook so badly it took me 2 tries to push it back in. I checked the back door again. Still locked. Deadbolt too. I didn't go back to bed. Instead, I went upstairs, turned on every hallway light, and sat on my bed gripping the bat until my arms ached. And that's when I saw it. The bed. I jumped out in such a rush earlier that the sheets were tangled, the blanket half hanging off, but now it was neat, perfectly made. The blanket pulled up, the top sheet folded down in a smooth line, the pillows fluffed. I hadn't done that. I know I hadn't. That was enough. I threw everything into a duffel bag, didn't even care what I grabbed. Phone, charger, toothbrush, clothes. I grabbed my keys, locked the door behind me, and peeled out of the driveway like something might follow me if I hesitated. I drove into town and parked in front of my friend Nate's apartment. Called him twice before he picked up. Even then, I had to convince him I wasn't just being paranoid. I slept on his couch that night with the bat still in my hands. I stayed there until my parents got back Sunday night. When they walked in, I told them everything. My mom looked worried, but my dad tried to be the calm one. He walked through the house, room by room, checking locks, windows, even the attic. Nothing. No signs of a break-in. Nothing missing. No weird footprints outside. No damage. Just a normal house. We were in the kitchen when he started making jokes. Just little things to ease the tension. I forced a smile. Even laughed once. Then we looked at the table. The same chair, pulled out again. Angled slightly toward the back door. That was it. We ran, and I haven't stayed alone in that house since. I'd signed the lease on this tiny rental house in southern Kentucky. A lopsided little place with peeling white paint, rust along the porch railing, and a crooked mailbox that always looked like it was about to fall off its post. The porch sagged toward the yard, like it was tired of holding up the house. A few windows were warped, and when trucks rumbled by on the road out front, the glass rattled like loose teeth. But it was cheap, it was quiet, and it was mine. First place I'd ever had completely to myself. I remember standing in the empty living room after the landlord handed me the keys, turning in a slow circle, letting it sink in that no one else was coming. I told myself the silence was going to feel like freedom. It didn't, not after the first few nights. At first, it was just a strange kind of stillness, the kind where every noise feels too loud. A creak in the floorboards made me stop walking. A gust of wind against the side of the house made me glance at the windows. But I figured that was normal. I wasn't used to it yet. I thought I'd adjust. Then little things started happening. Small enough that I brushed them off at first, but they stuck with me. I'd toss my keys on the kitchen counter after work. The next morning, they'd be somewhere completely different. Once on the windowsill above the sink, once on the floor by the back door, and once, this one really threw me, they were inside the fridge. Not like I dropped them while grabbing a drink. They were sitting neatly on the top shelf. I laughed it off that morning. Made a joke to myself about losing my mind. But deep down it felt wrong, like I was being messed with. Other things started to go weird too. My phone charger, which I always left plugged in by the couch, kept ending up wound up and set on the coffee table. A spoon showed up in the bathroom sink one morning. I hadn't taken food in there. Hadn't even been in that room since the night before. At first, I assumed I was scatterbrained. Overworked, new job, new place. Maybe I was just out of rhythm. But it kept happening, enough that I started keeping mental tallies. Did I move that? Did I really leave that cabinet open? I got used to second-guessing myself in my own house. The second night was when I really started paying attention. I just drifted off when I heard it. A long, low, dragging sound. The kind of sound wood makes when it's swollen and someone forces it open slowly. My eyes popped open. For a second, I couldn't tell if it was part of a dream. Then it happened again. That unmistakable groan of the back door shifting against the frame. I got up, moving quietly, and grabbed the aluminum bat from beside my dresser. My stomach felt tight, alert. I crept through the hallway, lights off, moving like someone in a bad TV drama. The back door was shut, still bolted. Nothing disturbed. I stood there staring at it for a long time, listening, hoping for silence, dreading it at the same time. I didn't sleep much after that. I convinced myself it was just the house settling. Old hinges, weird acoustics, maybe an animal brushing against the steps. All the things people say when they don't want to admit they're scared. By the fourth night, denial wasn't cutting it. I woke up certain I'd heard footsteps. Slow ones. Not shuffling, but steady. Methodical pacing across the living room. I held my breath, counting the seconds between each sound. Then I got up with the bat, every floorboard under my feet sounding 10 times louder than usual. I turned on the hallway light, then the living room light. Nothing, completely still. But the lamp on the side table, this little amber glass thing I never used, was glowing softly. I hadn't turned it on. I knew I hadn't. That was the moment it stopped feeling weird and started feeling like I wasn't alone. Then came the dream. Or at least, I thought it was a dream. I'd fallen asleep on the couch again, a half plate of spaghetti on the coffee table. In the dream, I was standing in the kitchen, facing the back door. Everything looked the same. Same chipped linoleum. Same smudge on the wall I'd never been able to scrub off. I was frozen. Couldn't move, couldn't speak. Just stood there watching as the deadbolt slowly slid open on its own. The metal scraped so sharply I could feel it in my teeth. Then the doorknob began to turn. I woke up with a full-body jolt sweating through my shirt. I sat up trying to calm my breathing. Then I noticed the kitchen light was on. I never left it on. I walked in, shaky, and there it was. The back door. Unlocked. I know I locked it. I know I locked it. I even remember thinking, I'll triple check, just in case. After that, things ramped up. I started going through a ritual every night, checking each window, bolting both doors, moving furniture slightly to see if it shifted. Once I stacked a chair under the doorknob. I took photos of doors, the stove, the windows. Proof for myself. Still, every morning something had changed. A chair out of place, a faucet dripping. One time the salt shaker was empty, but there was a small, uneven pile of salt on the bathroom floor. I never figured that one out. None of it was loud or obvious, just little invasions. Like someone or something was living beside me, rearranging pieces of my life to remind me they were there. The final night was the breaking point. I woke up at exactly 3. Don't ask me how. I just knew. The house was cold, though it had been a warm night, and I hadn't touched the thermostat. I opened my eyes and knew something was wrong. There was a sound. Breathing. Not mine. Not mine. It was slow, deliberate, and too close. Not raspy or labored, just steady. Like someone standing at the side of the bed. I didn't move at first. I couldn't. I just lay there still, wondering if I was dreaming. The sound didn't change, didn't fade or rise. Just kept going. Like whoever it was didn't care if I knew they were there. When I finally sat up and turned on the lamp, the room was empty, but the door was wide open. I had closed it. I remembered hearing the click of the latch. I always slept with it shut. That was it. I started packing before the sun was up. Didn't care what I grabbed. Just basics. Clothes, toiletries, my laptop. I let the dishes in the sink. Let my books, my favorite hoodie, a pair of sneakers I liked. Didn't matter. I was gone before 7. I drove to a diner 2 towns over. Sat there for 2 hours drinking bad coffee, deciding where to go next. Called my cousin in Lexington and stayed on her couch for weeks until I found a new apartment. I was 23 when I stayed alone in that farmhouse outside Maple Hollow, Tennessee. Even now, years later, I still get that knot in my stomach when I think about it. You know, that slow, creeping dread that settles in your gut before your brain even realizes why you're uneasy? That's the feeling I get every single time I remember that week. The house belonged to my Aunt Elise. She'd owned it for years, inherited it from her mother. She loved the quiet, said it was peaceful, good for the soul. Personally, I always thought it was a little too quiet. But when she asked me to house it while she went on a trip with her partner, I didn't hesitate. She'd done a lot for me over the years. Besides, I figured a week of solitude wouldn't hurt. I could catch up on reading, maybe finally finish that project I kept putting off. It sounded simple enough. Bring in the mail, water the hanging plants on the porch, and the 2 peace lilies inside. Make sure the place didn't look abandoned. Keep some lights on at night. Take the trash to the edge of the road on Thursday. Easy stuff. Aunt Elise even left a checklist on the fridge with little notes and smiley faces, like she expected me to get bored and forget. I pulled up late Friday afternoon. It was just starting to cool down for the evening, and the light was fading fast. The driveway curled off the main road like a narrow tunnel through bare trees. Some of them looked half dead, gnarled and leaning, like they'd been holding up the sky too long. When the trees finally opened up, the house came into view. 2 stories. Faded red siding. A porch wrapped around the front like a crooked smile. The kind of house you'd seen in an old photograph where nobody smiled. I carried in my stuff, just a duffel bag, my laptop, some groceries, and a bottle of wine I never ended up opening. Inside, the house was exactly how I remembered it. Cozy but old. Floorboards that groaned under your feet. Floral curtains that never quite stayed in place. A faint smell of lavender mixed with whatever the last candle had been. I made a sandwich, tossed my bag on the guest bed upstairs, and set up at the kitchen table with my laptop. The Wi-Fi was surprisingly decent for how far out we were. I got through some emails, made a to-do list, even started drafting the outline for a freelance article I'd been procrastinating on. That first night was quiet, uneventful. I remember thinking it was going to be a good week. Peaceful. No distractions. But then, just after midnight, something changed. I was sitting on the couch in the living room, scrolling through my phone with the TV on low. That's when I heard it. This sharp series of clicks from the front door. Not knocking, not tapping. Clicking, clicking, like someone pressing buttons on a keypad lock. Only there wasn't a keypad. I stared at the door, not moving, just listening. The clicks kept coming. 3, maybe 4 in a row. Then a pause. Then a heavy metallic clunk, like someone trying the handle. Trying it again. A scrape. Another pause. It sounded intentional. Not frantic or rushed deliberate. I stayed completely still on the couch, barely breathing. Every muscle in my body had gone rigid. The sound stopped after maybe a minute, but I didn't get up. I couldn't. I just sat there staring at the door like something was about to come through it. Eventually, I got up the nerve to peek out the window. Of course, there was nothing there. No car in the driveway, no movement in the trees. Just that eerie stillness that feels less like peace and more like the world holding its breath. I left every light on that night. Didn't even pretend to go to bed. I sat up at the kitchen table until I couldn't keep my eyes open anymore, and finally crashed on the couch around 4 in the morning. When I got up the next day, the first thing I did was check the porch. The frost hadn't fully melted yet, and that's when I saw them footprints. Deep ones, fresh, pressed right into the thin glaze of frost on the boards, leading directly to the front door. They weren't mine. They were heavier, wider. The steps didn't wander or turn. They just went straight to the door and stopped. Like whoever had been out there stood there for a while, watching, waiting. I followed them down into the yard, and then nothing. They just stopped. No trail leading away. No return path. They didn't veer into the trees or fade. They just ended. I stood there in the cold for a long time, staring at that last footprint. It felt impossible, like I'd walked into a dream halfway through, but it was real. I even took a photo of the prints, though I've never shown anyone. The rest of the day I spent doing busy work, cleaned the kitchen, swept the porch, watered the plants twice even though they didn't need it. Anything to make the house feel normal again. I kept telling myself the sounds from the night before could have been something mechanical. The furnace, pipes, maybe some kind of animal messing around outside. But every time I passed that front door, my stomach knotted up again. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been there, someone who genuinely believed they were supposed to be let in. That night, I decided to go to bed earlier. I figured maybe being alone was just making me anxious. I brought my phone and a flashlight up with me and left the lamp on next to the bed. The room stayed warm from the old baseboard heater. I remember lying there trying to read, pretending not to jump at every small creak the house made. For a while, it was fine. Then, maybe an hour after I shut my eyes, the doorknob to my bedroom turned. It wasn't subtle. It rattled sharply, once, twice, like someone gave it a good shake and then paused. Then another rattle. I sat bolt upright, heart thudding so loud it drowned out everything else. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. I just stared at that doorknob, expecting it to turn all the way, expecting the door to swing open any second. But it didn't. The movement stopped. The silence came back. I sat there, frozen in bed, trying to listen past the ringing in my ears. I didn't hear footsteps, no creaks, just nothing. Eventually, I made myself get up, legs trembling, and flipped on every light in the hall. It was empty. Bathroom door still cracked open. No sign of anything. I checked every window and door in the house, every latch, every lock. All of them were still shut, nothing broken. No signs of forced entry. But that didn't make me feel better. It made it worse. Because something had clearly been inside. I tried to calm myself down. Maybe it was a draft. Maybe a loose hinge. I went back to my room, sat on the bed, took a deep breath. Then something slammed. It came from the bathroom. A loud, sharp bang, like a door being thrown shut. I jumped up and rushed across the hall, flashlight in hand. The bathroom door was wide open, just gently swaying on its hinges, the way I'd left it. I stood there, staring into the empty bathroom, and felt something shift in me. That was the moment I stopped trying to rationalize. I knew then, without a doubt, that I was not supposed to be there. I packed so fast I don't even remember doing it. Clothes stuffed into my bag without folding. Laptop shoved between socks. I barely glanced at my aunt's checklist, just did the basics. Thermostat down, curtains drawn, porch light left on. The house stayed completely silent, like it was watching me pack. Like it was satisfied I'd finally figured it out. I walked down the stairs, one slow, creaking step at a time. Every sound echoed too loud. When I finally stepped outside, the cold hit me like a splash of water to the face. And then I realized how still it was. Not quiet. Still, no wind, no night animals. Just frozen air and that awful silence pressing in around me. I threw my bag in the car, started the engine, and backed out of the drive. I was 24 when I agreed to watch my cousin Caleb's house for a week, while he worked extra shifts at the packaging plant outside Millersfield. His place was way out in the Tennessee sticks, the kind of rural where GPS gives up and road signs are nailed to trees. When I think back on that week now, there's this dull pressure in my chest, like my body remembers something my mind would rather avoid. The arrangement was simple. Feed the dogs, bring in the mail, make the house look lived in so no one got ideas. Caleb said it would be easy, and I believed him. I'd stayed there once or twice as a kid, and nothing about the house felt spooky then. Just an old place in the country with creaky floors and a porch that sloped too far to one side. It sat off a gravel road, squeezed between a scraggly soybean field and a thick tree line that looked older than the Civil War. The house was a sagging, one-story box with faded siding, once beige, now the color of a washed crayon. The roof had patches in the wrong places. The gutters drooped like tired arms. But it was solid, in the way old country homes are. You could tell it had stood through worse. At first, the isolation didn't bother me. I'd grown up in rural Georgia and Alabama. Silence didn't automatically mean eerie. Honestly, I was looking forward to it. No traffic, no neighbors, no distractions. Just me, the dogs, and some time to catch up on emails. The first night was ordinary. I hauled my bag into the spare room, let the dogs out, Cleo and Rufus, two big dumb bundles of muscle and fur, and watched them tear across the yard. When they came back muddy and panting, they collapsed by the couch. I made a sandwich, opened my laptop at the kitchen table, and fell into a comfortable rhythm. It felt peaceful. Boring, even. The fridge hummed. The TV murmured in the background. I chipped away at a few tasks and let city life fall off me. I even thought maybe I'll come out here more often and get some real work done. Then, around midnight, the air changed. It's hard to explain because nothing looked different. The lights were on. The TV was still playing. The dogs were snoring at my feet. But the silence felt thick, like the house itself was holding its breath. And then I heard it. 3 taps. Not loud, not banging, just deliberate, evenly spaced, like someone knocking gently with their knuckles. 3 times. Applause. Then 3 more. At first I thought it was the TV, some sound effect. But when I muted it, the taps came again. Crisp, careful, like they wanted to be noticed, but not mistaken for anything else. I got up and walked to the back door. The curtain didn't cover the whole window, so I had to lean in close to peek through the gap. The porch light flicked on with a pop. It spilled pale light across the boards, and that was it. Just the porch. No figure, no movement. The tapping stopped. I stayed there holding my breath, waiting for footsteps or rustling. But all I heard was the hum of the porch light. The dogs didn't react. They kept sleeping, breathing steady. That unsettled me more than the sound itself. Those dogs bark at moths, lose their minds at car backfires. But that night, nothing. I told myself it had to be a branch or a possum, something boring. The next morning I checked the porch. That's when I saw the prints. The frost was still thick, glazing the boards and ground. And there they were. Footprints, bare, human, toes and all. They came up the steps, straight to the back door, and stopped. No prints going back. No signs of anyone turning around, just a one-way trail, ending exactly where I'd stood. I scanned the yard, the driveway, the tree line. Nothing. Just those prints, sharp and clear in the frost. I went inside and checked every lock twice. The rest of the day I couldn't sit still. I cleaned the kitchen, vacuumed rugs that didn't need it. I even alphabetized the spice rack, though I never touched a single spice. Every time I passed a window, I glanced out, expecting I don't know what. That night, I didn't even try to relax. I turned on every light. Left the TV running, the radio in the kitchen, YouTube on my phone. Cleo and Rufus stayed unnervingly close. Cleo even rested her head on my lap. Every creak of the floor made their ears twitch. I scrolled my phone, pretending the house felt normal. Then, at 1:30, the front doorknob rattled. Not gently, not like the wind. This was sharp, firm. Someone twisting with intent. The metal scraped in its socket. The dogs exploded, barking with their teeth bared, eyes locked on the door. The knob rattled harder, then stopped, dead. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might shake something loose, and then I made the worst choice possible. I grabbed a flashlight and checked every door and window. Everything was locked. Nothing broken, no one outside, which was somehow worse. Whoever had touched that knob had been right there, inches away. I barely slept. I paced the hall with a baseball bat in one hand, flashlight in the other. The dogs paced with me, ears low, tails stiff. We must have looked like a ridiculous little marching squad. Sometime after 3, I tried lying down. But before I could close my eyes, the house shook with a slam. It came from the bathroom at the far end of the hall. A violent crash, like the door had been thrown open hard enough to hit the wall. My heart stopped. The flashlight shook in my hand as I walked toward it, dogs growling low. But when I reached it, the bathroom door just hung there, swinging gently. Exactly the way I had left it earlier. That was it. No more excuses about pipes or old wood. The house didn't want me there. I packed in a frenzy, clothes shoved into a bag. Laptop grabbed, with the charger trailing behind me. I left every light on. Didn't care. Didn't even check if the fridge was open. The dogs were barking again. Not wildly this time, but low and steady. Their eyes fixed on the walls. I clipped their leashes, yanked them out the door. The moment we hit the yard, I felt it again. That heavy, smothering stillness. No wind, no insects, no night sounds at all. Just silence, thick enough to feel. I didn't look back. I couldn't. We loaded into the car. I floored it down the gravel drive and didn't slow until we hit pavement. When Caleb got home, he texted asking why I left early. I told him I had a deadline in Nashville. I was 17 when this happened. My parents were on their way to see my aunt in eastern Tennessee. It was about a 4-hour drive from our place in Mercer, Kentucky, and they planned to stay the night. That wasn't unusual. They had made that trip before, and I had been left home alone more than once. I usually didn't mind. It meant freedom, no questions, and no one reminding me to clean my room or unplug the toaster. But being alone in a house tucked against the woods feels different at night. In the day, the quiet is peaceful. At night, the quiet feels too deep, like silence that doesn't want to be broken. You notice more. The creaks, the clicks, the faint buzz from the old hallway light that flickers sometimes. Things that wouldn't matter in daylight suddenly feel personal when the sun goes down. Still, I told myself to relax, a mini staycation. No school tomorrow. It was Friday night, so the weekend stretched ahead. I grabbed 2 slices of leftover pepperoni pizza, poured a soda, and settled onto the couch. I flipped through Netflix until I found some random sci-fi show I had half-watched before. Aliens. Bad dialogue. It was just background noise. By the time the second episode started, it was past 11. I was curled under a fuzzy blanket, one sock off, the other foot dangling over the armrest. The house had gone still, so still that even shifting my weight made the couch springs groan too loud. Every movement echoed. I heard the refrigerator hum in the kitchen, the steady tick of the wall clock, even a faint buzz of a fly trapped behind the curtain. Things I usually ignored. Around midnight, I paused the show and got up for another soda. Passing the front door, I stopped. It was cracked open, not wide, just enough to see a sliver of the porch and feel a thin ribbon of cool air drift in. At first, I thought maybe it hadn't latched, but I was sure I had locked it earlier. My dad drilled that into me. Lock the doors. Always, no exceptions. I stepped closer. The knob turned easily. It was completely unlocked. I shut it hard, twisted the deadbolt until it clicked, then yanked the handle twice. Locked, definitely locked, definitely locked. Weird, but not impossible. Maybe I hadn't closed it right. Maybe the wind caught it. I went back to the couch. But now the TV was off, not just muted. Completely off. No blue standby light. No menu bar. Just black. The remote was still on the armrest. I pressed the power button. The screen blinked back to life, right where the episode had left off, but there was no sound. The volume bar went up, but nothing came through the speakers. I told myself it was the wiring. The house was built in the 70s. The electrical system wasn't reliable. Maybe a loose wire, but I was unsettled. I tried watching anyway, but I kept glancing at the front door, listening too hard. Then I heard it. A sound from upstairs. One single scrape, long and low, like something heavy dragging across the floorboards. Then silence. I froze, completely still. Upstairs only had 3 rooms. My bedroom, the spare bedroom, a tiny bathroom we barely used. I hadn't been up there since earlier in the day when I grabbed a hoodie. I sat on the couch for 5 minutes, staring at the ceiling. Maybe something fell. Maybe a hanger in the closet. Maybe even the neighbor's cat, though that would have been a mystery of its own. Finally, I grabbed the heavy-duty flashlight from the drawer, the one my dad uses when the power goes out. I started up the stairs. Each step creaked under my weight. The hallway felt narrow, tighter than usual, like I needed to turn my shoulders slightly. My bedroom door was shut just like I left it. The spare room was cracked a foot the way it always was. I shone the flashlight inside. Boxes, old blankets, a busted dresser we never moved out. Everything the same. Then I turned to look at my room. The door I knew I had shut. It was wide open. I froze, not breathing. I walked over, closed it, turned the knob until it clicked, and jiggled it once to be sure. Latched. Then I hurried back down the stairs, not pretending to be calm. On the couch again, I grabbed the remote and flipped channels. I wasn't watching. I just wanted sound. Commercials, game shows, infomercials, it didn't matter. But minutes later, the TV cut out. No fade. No glitch. Just black. Just black. The power light gone. Silence. And then the scraping started again. This time, it wasn't upstairs. It was in the kitchen. I froze. The sound was heavier now, lower to the ground. Something thick dragging across tile in short bursts. I gripped the flashlight. Slowly, I leaned around the edge of the couch, peering toward the kitchen. That's when I saw it. The flashlight I had left on the counter tipped over. Slowly. It rolled off the edge and hit the floor with a clatter. It bounced once, then stopped against the cabinet. And behind it, the back door stood wide open. That's when I snapped. I ran in, slammed it shut, twisted the lock so hard my fingers hurt. My heart pounded so hard I felt it in my ears. I checked everything, windows, the side door, even the basement latch. I opened closets, flipped switches, everything else was locked, nothing broken, no sign of entry. I was trying to breathe, trying to make sense of it, when I walked back toward the living room and stopped. The front door, the one I had deadbolted, the one I had checked, was wide open. I didn't think. I didn't grab shoes. I didn't grab my phone or keys. I just ran. Straight out the front door, barefoot down the gravel, across weeds and stones that cut but didn't matter. I didn't stop until I reached the road. About 200 yards away, under the glow of my neighbor's porch light, I collapsed on the steps. I hugged my knees, still shaking. I didn't knock. I didn't wake them. I just stayed there. All night. When the sun came up, I heard the sound of my parents' car pulling into the driveway. I walked back slowly. My mom got out, groggy, asking what I was doing outside. My dad looked confused. I told them what happened. Most of it anyway. My dad checked the front door, went inside, looked around. A few minutes later, he came back out. He said what I already knew he'd say. Everything's shut. Nothing's missing. All the doors are locked. But I know what I saw. And I never stayed alone in that house again. I lived in this tucked away, nothing ever happens part of Kentucky, where most days rolled by slow and uneventful. Our house sat right where the farmland ended and the woods began. Flat fields stretched for miles on one side, and a thick wall of trees stood on the other. In summer, you could always hear the bugs. In winter, you heard nothing at all. Real quiet place. One of those spots where people left their doors unlocked because they figured nothing bad ever happened around here. That weekend, my parents drove out to Ohio to visit my grandma. She wasn't sick. It was just a routine trip. They offered to let me skip school and go with them, but I had a test Monday I didn't want to make up. Besides, staying home alone for 2 days sounded easy enough. I'd done it before without a problem. The first night went how you'd expect. I microwaved leftover spaghetti, which always tasted better the second time. I parked myself on the couch, scrolling through my phone while the TV played in the background. I fell asleep right there, still in my jeans, phone halfway slipped from my hand. I think I woke up once around 2 in the morning and stumbled into bed. Nothing weird, just another quiet night. The second night, that was different. It started off normal. I was in the kitchen rinsing a glass, something I only did when I was home alone, because usually I just leave it in the sink. I remember the water running, the way it echoed in the empty room. Then I heard it. The front door, not slamming, not banging, just this soft click, like someone gently pulled it closed and let the latch settle. Clean, smooth, final. My stomach flipped. You know that feeling when your brain realizes something's off before you do? That was it. I froze. Didn't even turn off the water, just stood there listening. No footsteps, no voices, just silence. And somehow, that was worse. I tried to tell myself it was nothing. Maybe the wood shifted. Maybe I hadn't latched the door properly and a draft pushed it shut, but the air felt still. There was no breeze, no movement. And deep down, I knew I'd heard something deliberate. Eventually, I dried my hands and made a slow loop through the house, checking every window, every door. Even the ones I'd already locked earlier out of habit. I got to the front door last. Still closed. Nothing obviously wrong. But that didn't mean much. The house didn't feel the same after that. Every corner seemed too quiet. Every creak made me stop and listen harder than I wanted to. I went into my brother's old room and grabbed the aluminum bat he'd left behind when he moved out. It was dented at the top from hitting baseballs off a tree, but it felt solid in my hand. I didn't do much the rest of the night. Sat on the couch, tried to watch a movie. Kept glancing toward the front door like it owed me an explanation. By midnight, I gave up on pretending I was relaxed and went to bed, dragging the bat with me. I set it beside the nightstand where I could grab it fast. I don't know if I actually slept or just drifted in and out, but sometime late in the night, I heard it again. Footsteps, slow, steady, crossing the ceiling above my room. Our house didn't have an upstairs. It was a one-story ranch. Above my bedroom, just attic insulation, a few wooden beams and shingles. Nothing you could walk on, no reason for footsteps. I stayed frozen in bed, heart racing, bat already in my hand. The steps moved in a deliberate pace, crossing from one end of the house to the other. Then they stopped, right above me. It felt like someone was standing right there on the roof, or in the attic, if we had one big enough. I didn't breathe. Just stared at the ceiling, waiting for the next sound, but it never came. The noise faded, and eventually morning light started seeping through the blinds. I got out of bed slowly, like whatever had been above me might still be nearby. Walked through the house again. Everything looked fine, but not quite right. The kitchen chair closest to the hallway had been pulled out slightly. I hadn't touched it. The TV remote, which I clearly remembered leaving on the couch armrest, sat on the kitchen counter. Small things, sure, but when you're alone, small things stand out. I called my dad, told him about the noises, the door, the weird little changes. He listened, then gave me the usual advice. Lock the doors. Try to rest. Probably just the house creaking. Probably just nerves. Maybe. But that night, I left every light on, every single one. I sat on the couch again, bat in my lap. Max, my dog, a shaggy golden mutt we'd had since I was 9, stuck close. He wasn't usually clingy, but that night he wouldn't leave my side. It was just after midnight when the kitchen faucet turned on. The noise hit me like a slap. That full, rushing sound of water pouring into the sink. No one was in the kitchen. I could see it from where I sat. I stood up fast, heart pounding. Max growled, low and unsettled, and followed close behind me. I turned the faucet off, then backed away slowly. That's when the hallway light went out. Not flickered, not dimmed. Just off, like someone had flipped the switch. Max went tense, pressed against my leg. His growl deepened, sharper this time. He stared into the hallway like something was standing there. I stared too. I couldn't see anything, but it felt like the house was watching me. We didn't move, not for a long time. Then, around 3 in the morning, the footsteps came back. Not above me. Not outside. Inside the house. They started in the hallway, just outside the bedrooms. Slow, uneven, a shuffle drag sound, like someone was limping, not sneaking, not running, just walking, like they belonged there. Max bared his teeth. His whole body leaned into me, tense and ready. The footsteps drew closer, stopping at the edge of the living room, just beyond the lamp's glow. I couldn't see anything, but I knew something was there. I didn't speak, didn't move. My breath felt stuck. I remember thinking if I looked away, it would step forward. But I couldn't sit there forever. So I grabbed my keys, wrapped my fingers in Max's collar, and moved. Fast, threw open the back door. Barefoot, ran across the wet grass with Max at my side. Fumbled the car door open, shoved him inside, and jumped behind the wheel. I locked the doors like my life depended on it. I didn't glance back at the house. I drove straight to our neighbors, Gordon and Melissa Atwell, almost 4 in the morning, and I didn't care. I pounded on their door until Gordon opened it, bleary-eyed in his bathrobe. He took one look at me and let me in. I stayed there the rest of the night, curled on their couch with Max at my feet. When my parents got back the next day, I told them everything. I don't know if they believed me, but they never left me alone in that house again. We lived there a couple more years, but I never spent another night alone. The house was a small, beat-up place in a quiet patch of southern Kentucky, not far from a town called Elbridge. You wouldn't find it unless you were really looking, or you got lost trying to shortcut through the back roads. There were trees lining both sides of the gravel driveway, and when the sun went down, it got dark fast. The kind of dark where you couldn't see your hand in front of your face. No street lights, no glow from neighbors' houses, just blackness pressing against every window. The kind of dark that made you feel like you were being watched, even when you knew you were alone. It was the first place I'd ever rented by myself. No roommates, no shared walls. Just me, a couple of second-hand couches, and a mattress on the floor. I told myself it was a fresh start. I needed space. Time to figure things out after a messy breakup and an even worse job situation. The rent was cheap, and the landlord, Mr. Harlan, seemed harmless enough. He wore faded flannel shirts that looked like they hadn't been washed in years. Smoked hand-rolled cigarettes on the porch like he had nowhere else to be. Said he'd inherited the place from his aunt who had, quote, kind of just faded out. That's what he told me. I should have asked more questions. The first week was uneventful. I set up the basics: coffee maker, space heater, Wi-Fi from a satellite provider that worked maybe half the time. The floors creaked a little. The pipes groaned if you ran hot water too long. Nothing unusual for an older house. Most nights I fell asleep watching shows on my laptop, curled under blankets because the insulation was practically non-existent. Then things started getting strange. The first time, I barely noticed. I tossed my keys onto the kitchen counter, same spot as always, next to a chipped blue mug I used as a change jar. The next morning, they weren't there. I checked the sink, the couch cushions, even the trash, half convinced I was losing it until I found them on the living room windowsill. Perched carefully, balanced like someone had lined them up, I laughed it off. Told myself I must have set them there without thinking. Or maybe I dropped them while messing with the blinds. Something dumb. I shrugged it off. Until the next thing happened. The boxes. I'd unpacked the last of my stuff and left a stack of broken down boxes near the back door. Moving junk. Amazon packages, some liquor store crates. I figured I'd haul them to the recycling center eventually. But the day after I left them there, they were gone. Not moved. Not piled somewhere else. Gone. I checked outside, thinking maybe I'd taken them out and forgot. Nothing. Not in the bin. Not beside the shed. I even crawled under the house. Don't ever do that alone, by the way, just in case. Nothing but dirt and spiders. I texted Harlan thinking maybe he'd grab them. He said no. Sounded annoyed. I even asked. Told me if I was throwing stuff out, I should leave it by the curb. From then on, the weirdness got louder. One night, I was watching some trashy dating show. Everyone on screen too tan, too fake. Then I heard footsteps in the hallway. Not creaks. Not pipes. Footsteps. Footsteps. Slow, heavy, measured. I paused the TV. Sat perfectly still. Silence. Too much silence. The kind where your ears start ringing. Heart racing, I stood up and walked the hallway. Bedroom, bathroom, linen closet. Nothing. I told myself the house was just old. Wood shifts, temperature changes. I even Googled it. House makes walking sounds. Forum said the same thing. You're fine. That night, I locked my bedroom door and kept the flashlight on the nightstand, just in case. Then came the door handle. It was just past 3 in the morning. I know because I looked at the microwave clock when I sat up. I've been dreaming something restless, but I was wide awake when I heard it. The back door handle. Rattling. Not one quick jiggle. Steady, rhythmic, like someone was testing it. Press, pause, press again. Long enough for my brain to run through every option. Drunk neighbor? Ordle, wind. But it wasn't windy. And I didn't have neighbors close enough for that to make sense. I slid out of bed, moved down the hallway, every hair on my arm standing up. The rattle stopped, but the air felt thick, charged, like the seconds before a thunderstorm. The door looked normal, locked, still, no sound. I didn't open it. I just backed away, shut my bedroom door, and sat in bed with the flashlight on until the sun came up. The next day, I convinced myself it was nerves, stress, exhaustion. Maybe the handle slipped in its housing. I even tried shaking it myself, but it didn't sound the same. And then, the boxes came back. I was making mac and cheese for dinner when I heard it. The scrape of wood on wood. A chair sliding across the floor. I spun around. The chairs were perfectly tucked in, but on the table, the boxes. The same ones that had vanished. Stacked upright. Not flattened. Not taped. Not taped. Arranged neatly in the center of the table, like someone had carried them in and placed them there just so I'd notice. My skin burned hot and cold. I thought, I didn't put those there. I didn't unlock the door. I didn't even touch the door today. I didn't check the rooms. Didn't look for forced entry. I just grabbed my essentials, wallet, phone, keys, and walked straight out the front door. Didn't turn off the stove. Didn't lock up. Didn't even take a jacket. I drove to my friend Marla's place, gripping the wheel so tight my knuckles hurt. She opened the door, saw my face, and didn't ask questions. Just handed me a blanket and let me crash on the couch. I didn't sleep much. Kept checking the windows. Kept waiting for something to follow me. By morning, I decided I wasn't going back. I called Harlan and told him I was done. Didn't explain. Didn't care about the deposit. He muttered about contracts and keys, but I hung up. Everything I owned stayed in that house. Clothes, furniture, books, dishes, all of it. I never saw any of it again.